We are a third of the way through your AFL Fantasy season and getting real close now to the mid-season buys. But here at the Coaches Panel, we've got you covered with the trade plans you need to be considering heading into round 9. So who are my top 10 trade targets for the week? Let's check them out. My number one probably should come as no surprise, but Hugh Boxshall is the most important trade you could be making this week. It's rare at this point of the season. We've got someone under 300,000 that we feel we're going to get a couple of games from, but he was outstanding during the previous round. Sticking tackles, spreading well across the game, impacting the contest and ultimately the team result. And to be able to dish up a 74, I think that's right in the scope of what we're looking for. He did slow as the game went on a little bit, but the fact is, negative break even, decent scoring capacity that is shown at the VFL level, now transcending through to the elite level, under 300,000. I think this is right where we should be going. The only little flag that I'll wave here is that Mateus Philippou was a late out, and how much of that aided the scoring of Boxshall or not. Ultimately, we're never going to truly know until this week unfolds. But regardless, this is not an on-field option. You should have better options at your M8, but to free up some cash, whether it be off a Moraes, whether you're wanting to move on a Pryor, a Stone, however you're wanting to get there without the positional versatility of your side. This, to me, is the number one trade target. It is rare to get now at this point of the year. A good scoring option who's going to get a couple of weeks. St Kilda aren't going to be changing too much to that side. He was best 22. There is a little bit of a vest concern I do have. But again, putting him there with what he's done, with the variables we've got, I'm really happy to make him my number one downgrade and my number one trade target for the week. Maybe you've got Boxshall already and you're also looking to make a downgrade, or this week you're just purely attacking for a double cash approach. And I think that is a viable play for a lot of teams as we head to the mid-season buys. We are starting to build not only a bit of a chest of ammunition that we can start upgrades, but also when these cash makers and money makers roll through, we do want to maximize when they are there. And that's why for me, the number two trade target this week is a Joe Fonte. Defensive eligible, a $354,000 price point, a little bit more than maybe what people would like, but dished up a really handy 70 against a pretty difficult opposition, it's got to be said. A break even of 11 is very, very attainable. And it looks like it's a 1 week sample size, but it does look like, given his performance, he may now have taken that spot that up until this junction in the season, Connor Stone had held. So I think he's going to get a couple of weeks for us. He's got a much more favourable buy than contrasting it to a Hardiman, who's in a similar price point with some similar variables. With a Hardiman, he's not playing in a month's time, whereas Fonte, he's still at least available to play with them and the Giants having the final buy block for me. So I think Fonte's probably and is the better downgrade option, certainly of the two. Hardiman doesn't make my top 10. Fonte makes my number 2 spot. If I'm already a Boxshall owner, this to me is the number one downgrade option for you to chase. And for some people, I'm very, very comfortable, depending on where your team sits from a cash generation, from a bench hygiene perspective, which is about still maximizing cash improvement in players for guys that aren't on field. I think that's still very, very critical. So Fonte for me is my number 2 downgrade option. If I was looking to make an upgrade, I think Harry Sheezel, you're going to want to get him. He's back into that distribution spot off halfback and absolutely racking up the pill. There is a clear directive that has been coached into this team, which is get Harry the ball at all costs. And at some points, that's to the detriment of the team, but they're clearly playing that way. And Harry is maximizing that by getting into positions that, again, sometimes aren't the smartest play, but he's there with the demand of the team and the coaching emphasis to get the ball to Harry. It might not be great from a impact per possession But in AFL Fantasy, politely, we don't care two stuffs about that. We're all about feeding Harry the ball. At 1.053 million, he's got an attainable break even. It's right in this spot where this is the last week. As far as I'm concerned, this is the last week you could get Harry before round 13. Other than this, you're going to be having round 10 and 11. It's not worth trading into a guy that will have that round 12 bye. You must get these next 3 games to maximize it. You can't be skinning that down of 3 of the 4 to 2 of the 3 to 1 of the 2. You can't do that. If you want Harry, it is now or it is after the buys. It still might not be the most ideal trade for every team, but he is in this distribution spot across halfback. They are feeding and funneling the ball through him. And from a value perspective, this is as good a time as you're probably going to get now. Over the last week or two have been optimal. This is the last chance before the bye. You don't have to do it this week, but everything is pointing towards, if you do wait, you're probably going to be heading back towards paying a similar price tag for what you would have to start the year. And if the reason you didn't get him was his price point, why are you trading into him then? Just a thought. But for me, he's my number 1 upgrade this week. In next for me is Chad Warner. This might feel a little bit high for some. And he was okay last week, despite being without a tag of Bedford for around about a third to a half of the game. I thought he was really important early on for Sydney. But I love Chad at this spot at 861,000, the break even in the average of aligned, which is always a good indicator that it's about the right time to trade into someone. But what I love about him here is I look at the fixture of opponents that they're about to run into over the next 5 weeks, and there's some incredibly nice matchups that sit through here. It starts this week with Essendon, they roll into Carlton, then it is Melbourne, slightly difficult, if not neutral, against the Crows, and then the perfect matchup in round 13. They have Richmond, arguably the best matchup for inside mids in the competition at the moment is that matchup. So to be able to get that during the buys, look, politely, he's actually someone I'm very comfortable to get over the next 5 weeks and just drop him like a high school crush when I get to that mid-season buy, because after the buy, the fixture does really start to get quite restrictive for inside mids for the Swans. But this next 5 weeks, arguably as good as it gets on paper. And I think there'll be 1 or 2 quieter games. And by quieter, I mean 70s and 80s. And I think there's going to be a bunch of games, at least 2, if not 3, that I'm pretty comfortable forecasting a triple figure score. Based off that, if I could get him towards that 930, 940, 950 price point and net myself a handful of tons in the stretch, well, now I've got premium performances and I'm making money. This is exactly what you want to be doing at this junction of the year. To me, Chad Warner is a great buy at this time. It does have some risk associated to it, far more than what Sheezel does, but also you're dropping about 200k less. My number 5 trade target. I love this guy. I love owning him. As much as the first quarters have been frustrating me as a current owner, can't help but advocate for him to be someone you want to get into your team. My number 5 trade target is Tom Green. Just a fraction over $1 million. Might arguably still have a little bit of cash to sneak off him, given he's got a break even of 118 and he's rarely cracked that score this year. But what I love about Tom is a couple of things. One is the tag is clearly now prioritizing to a Finn Callaghan, who is a much more impact per possession type of player than what Tom is. So I think that's really favourable. So when we're thinking about players that might be able to get locked down and really capped at their scoring potential, that doesn't feel like that's the case anymore for Tom and for the Giants. I love it because it's right at the back end of the buys. And so all of a sudden this next 3 weeks heading to the buys, and then you've got that sort of 4 weeks before his after that, you're really 8 weeks away. And in that 8-week stretch, there's a couple of really favourable matchups that I think are captaincy, if not vice captaincy worthy, pending on your other options in that week. So for what he can do, I think he's closer to a 110 guy. He's starting the games incredibly slow in the first quarter, but the third and the fourth, he's working his way into the game. If we can get a little bit more touch on the ball, Tom, to start quarters and start the first quarter, then that 110 territory is right about there. For me, this is the best pure mid upgrade that you could be getting into when you think of your buy structure, when you think about buying low on a player, and when you think about what the fixture's about to dish up to us, and the fact that I believe he is now free from any tag targeting. This is an outstanding outcome. So who's my top 5 to recap before I get to my next 5? It's Boxshall, it's Fonte, it's Sheezel, it's Warner, and it is Tom Green. You ready for my number 6? This might be controversial. Rowan Marshall. He's in at 910,000. Again, may just have a little bit more cash to slide off before you're maximizing him at peak time, but it's fascinating to me. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's fascinating to me to see people looking to trade out of Tom De Koning this week, which is perfectly fine and viable and not a bad decision as a concept, but universally ignoring Rowan Marshall and thinking predominantly one of English, Gawn, or Cherry. And now, arguably, all three of them have been brilliant, but they're not buying low at an option. Now, the thing I will hear about as a reason for not considering Marshall is, well, he's been battling some soreness. Apparently, he's got a bit of a sore toe. At least if you're like, oh, the reason I'm not doing it is because I'm a little bit concerned about his durability. Okay, I'll at least hear that as a viable conversation. But that's not the narrative. It's, no, I want to get the best. Well, aren't we still at this point of the season trying to maximize our team value, trying to maximize our ability to upgrade and to get the moves that we want in our team and to get these rookies off field? Not every week you're going to get a Trainer and a Reed and an Ashcroft, because there are going to be other weeks you get the Pryor, you get the Lindsay type, you get the Paul Cleary score. So not every week will your rookie pop like we had a few this week, because we had a few also not do so. For me, if I'm looking for the value game and I'm looking for scoring pedigree, Rowan sits in that spot. And so if you are thinking of moving off a Tom De Koning and you haven't considered Rowan, you need to correct course. Now, is the injury narrative in the abyss a reason to not go there? Of course. But let's see the information as it keeps coming out. Sometimes a little bit of rest is all it actually takes. I thought he was good on the weekend without being outstanding. The fixture's not as chaotic as some might tend to think that it is. And if I'm looking to maximize my dollars, Rowan might just be the guy. That's why I've got him at number 6. My number 7 trade target is a guy that up until about 3 minutes into the end of the round was destined for a bit of a disappointing score. And then the greatest junk time performance in 60 seconds I've ever heard. Yeah, my number 7 trade target, Dayne Zorko. I want to put him there. He's just sitting in that $1 million price point. Had it not been for some junk time Zorko, he was under $1 million, but he's sitting in there, been one of the best premium defenders, certainly this year. Has had a quiet couple of weeks, but this week, even though it was a bit of a difficult matchup, he still found a way to stretch to a triple-digit score. Now, the only reason he's not higher or lower on this list is he's still got scoring pedigree and he's still got a pretty favourable buy that helps us with the moves that we want to make. And we're not overpaying for Dane like we probably would be for a Lachie Whitfield, who we're paying at his peak capacity, whereas Zorko, we're probably paying about fair value for what he is. The challenging thing for Dane and why some might not be interested in is, well, his past month hasn't been great from a form perspective. And second to that is Kadeen Coleman returned on the weekend and absolutely dominated the VFL. So those are two things that probably trend against Zorko. And while owners have been frustrated over the last month, But again, someone's frustration is another person's opportunity, because what I'm hearing from Chris Fagan in media reports over the last 24 hours is, yeah, it was great to have Coleman back. However, we have people in the team playing these roles and playing in good form. And so that kind of commentary doesn't lend itself to me that Kitty's just going to get escorted straight in and gifted the opportunity and not be eased into this. They clearly know that he's inside their best 22 when fit, when firing, and when in form. But they don't need to play this square peg in a round hole approach, because they're clearly lining up for another attempt to get into their third consecutive grand final. And so I think it's a great consideration, and why for some, Zorko, they'll get scared off for it, and others will see the opportunity that sits through there. But it's why he does belong in the top 10, because on potential, almost against any opponent, 110 is within his reach. You also know he's going to work hard. You also know that teams need multiple distribution outlets, and we're seeing that in multiple teams now to be successful with ball movement, and Dane is delivering week on week on week. So I've got him in at that number 7 spot. I think he's still a good option. He's not a top line selection for me this week, but I think he's still a really handy option. You ready for my last 3? They're all in that 900k plus territories, and one's over $1 million. Next one, I debated about whether it was 7 or 8 to put this guy, but he's right in the pocket for me of a great option. Number 8 trade target is Josh Dacos. 935,000. That average of 94 is starting to come back to where I thought he would be, which is a mid to high 90s guy across the year. He struggled a little bit at the start of the year, specifically that game where he got tagged against the Swans for gather round. Braden Campbell did a pretty good job negating his space and the Magpie ball movement across halfback. But really over the last couple of weeks, he has come to the fore. Plenty of transition footy. He's getting plenty of kick-ins to go alongside it. And what's going helpful here is a really favourable fixture in contrast to the first 6 weeks of the year. It's really opened up now, and it's actually really juicy off the back of their mid-season bye. I'd happily trade into Josh at this point. Maybe you're going, okay, I might not get the potential ceiling games that a Zorko might offer, but I'm going to save myself 70,000, and I'm going to hope that Zorko's ceiling's capped a little bit and that Dacos can hover around this 90 to 105 sort of territory for the next 2 months. That's an absolutely viable play, and I do like Josh Dacos as a trade target. It's why he sits inside my top 10. And then the last 2, let's stay in the midfield. Josh Dunkley is my number 9 trade target. 11% of coaches own him. He is 1.075 million and an average of 110. This is what I can tell you about Josh. Is there are going to be games this year where he will just be at 90 at 3/4 time and he will creep to a 105. There will also be games with Josh where he'll be at 70 at 3/4 time and he'll walk out with a 135. He is so enjoyable to own because it never do you really feel like the scoring is away from him. And it's because he gets involved in everything. Defensively, he's the best pressure player that they've got in that midfield. When he wraps his arms around a player and tackles, rarely does a tackle get broken out of him. So there's a banked 4 points for you right there, let alone the opportunity for free kicks and disposals that can come off the back of that. He gets involved in winning contested footy as well. It's not just left up to a Lockie Neal or a Hugh McCluggage. He's in there winning it. And then the third thing I love is he gets involved with his high-end work rate to get uncontested possessions and those easy +6 outlets where he's taking a mark and getting involved. The Brisbane game style does have plenty of marks and uncontested possessions about it, which is super favourable for us in AFL Fantasy. So a player that's got 50 to 60 point quarter capacity with him always is just someone fun to own. He's going to give you a couple of 90s, not going to lie. He's going to drop you a couple of 130s, but I think from now to the end, he'll pretty much be what he is now, which is a 110 guy. And let's be honest, when you can get a player of that capacity into your team, it's always a decent play. I'm a big Josh Dunkley mark. I'm a big fan on what he can do. And anytime I get a chance to at least consider trading into him, always find it hard not to pick him. And then my last trade target for the week is Tim Taranto, 950,000 coming up against the West Coast Eagles this week. You should get an absolute monster pop score this week as a result. It was a really difficult matchup last week against the Hawks. They're one of the most restrictive teams for inside midfielders to score against, and yet he still squeezed out the ton. It's what I love about Tim Taranto is he finds a way to get it done. The market share of the percentage of team score and what he delivered is incredibly high. And like I've mentioned, the West Coast Eagles midfield matchup this week is so good. Just go back to last week. Viney popped a monster for him. Petrarca popped another decent 120 plus score. Gawn, I know they're different types of players, but it just shows about the volume. He had over 30 possessions in this game. That's all in and around winning the ball through midfield components. I could just see Tim absolutely dishing up a 120 plus score for us. The only concern I have about Tim is he is prone every couple of weeks to just a quarter where he's doesn't score well. Whether or not it be Uze positionally makes a change, puts him more forward, gives the kids an opportunity or not. Sure, that might be the reason. But we saw that not in round 8, but in round 7. I think it was the third quarter, completely disappeared. But if you're looking for a guy that can dish up 110 potential at a value point, that is a great market share ownership of scoring through the midfield, has a great matchup this week, Tim's your guy. There are going to be a few patches between now and the mid-season bye that might get you a little bit jittery, but regardless, he sits in the pocket of a player I'd strongly want to own in my team. If you're looking to kind of get a 1 week hit of a really good score and hope that that really bumps that cash movement up a little bit, you might be able to move him to $1 million plus. By the time he gets to your mid-season, I think Double T is definitely in the mix. And so those are my top 10 trade targets for the week. What moves are you making in AFL Fantasy? I'd love to know. Why don't you comment below and let me know. If you're enjoying these videos, maybe it's our strategy sessions that we've done every single week, whatever it is that you're loving about the Coaches Panel. If you haven't subscribed yet, my friend, could you hit that subscribe button? It's a small, simple task for you, but it makes a grand and big impact for us. Make sure you like the video. If I've given any of the trades that you're planning on making this week of trade-ins, if I've nailed one of yours, why don't you give this video a like as well? Hey, we'll be back later in the week with a Super Coach edition of the trade targets. And then late Tuesday night, we will drop our strategy session where we unpack who, what, where, how, the moves you should be making and what you could do to get your team in ultimate success positions to be able to win the car in AFL Fantasy and to beat your mates in your leagues. Hey, good luck this week. We can't wait to be talking fantasy footy with you again real soon.